Welcome, everyone. I'm Pete Rizzo, editor-at-large at Kraken, the best place to buy and sell Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And I'm your host for this special edition Kraken live stream. To discuss the state of Bitcoin, I'm joined by John Newbery, founder of Brink, a new research and development center seeking to educate the next generation of Bitcoin developers. Just last week, Kraken donated $150,000 to Brink to benefit its mentorship program. Funds provided by Kraken will be awarded by the Brink board and based on the individual's contribution history and potential. Once again, welcome to the show, John.
Hi, Pete. Good to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you and excited to chat a little bit about Bitcoin as a technology and science, which I know is something that you're pretty well versed in. So maybe we can start there high level. I think a lot of people right now are hearing about Bitcoin for the first time, and they're hearing about it as an asset. Right? They're hearing that Bitcoin is something you can buy, sell, own. Maybe you could speak a little bit to more about how Bitcoin is a technology that's maybe a little bit broader than it just being an asset.
Sure. Well, Bitcoin, the technology was developed by Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he or she or they are, and was unleashed on the world in 2008, 2009. So Satoshi wrote a white paper, and that appeared in 2008, October 2008, and then the first version of the software came out in January 2009, so just under 12 years ago. And it was approaching the problem of how to create a decentralized digital currency. So Bitcoin is a digital currency, or money, or an asset, or whatever you want to call it. The interesting thing about it is it's decentralized. There's no central party that's controlling the ledger or what transactions are added to that ledger. And Satoshi solved that problem with proof of work and mining, which was a very novel way of doing it. No one had thought of that before. And it all flowed from there. That was the beginning. And we've made a few subtle changes, very small changes, but essentially the system that Satoshi wrote in 2008 is what we still have today. And that longevity and that stability, I think, is what gives Bitcoin interest and value.
Well, certainly there are people out there. I know there are a lot of critics, who would still allege today that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, right? It's something that is a financial get-rich-quick scheme. What makes Bitcoin computer science to you? Like, what makes it as something that is scientific rather than something that falls into one of these sort of investment scheme categories?
Well, it's a mixture, an amalgamation of many different very interesting techniques and technologies. It's based on cryptography, and everything that Satoshi put together to go into Bitcoin had existed before. The genius of it was the way that Satoshi mixed all of those things into a system that worked as a whole. And it works using cryptography, so cryptographic hashes and digital signatures, and it works using game theory that miners will be incentive aligned to do the right thing. And putting those two things together on top of a P2P network, a peer-to-peer network, which has no central control, those were the ingredients that made Bitcoin. And yeah, like I said, it all started there, and that's where we still are, basically. It works, and we continue to make small changes, but that system now has 12 years history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always find it fascinating, to kind of unpack. There's always more to learn about Bitcoin as a technology. One of my favorite, things to think about is how, the Bitcoin price isn't something that the Bitcoin software really understands anything about, right? The Bitcoin software doesn't have that relationship with an exchange price. How do you view those two things, or how do you explain them being somewhat differentiated, even though a lot of people kind of just equate Bitcoin to the Bitcoin price?
Well, when I think about Bitcoin and what I want it to be, which is a world currency, a world money, a global money that is accessible to as many people as possible, to get there, the price necessarily needs to go up because it's a scarce thing, and that price going up, it demonstrates the value of that scarce thing. So if Bitcoin is worth $1 in 10 years' time, then Bitcoin has failed because it's not valuable to people and it's not bringing value to people's lives. So for Bitcoin to succeed, the price needs to go up, and there are kind of virtuous cycles between the price going up and companies like Kraken and other exchanges building out the infrastructure that allow people to onboard onto Bitcoin, develop interest, reputation, all of those things. So number go up, and getting rich is not necessarily the goal, but it's an important part of it, I think.
Interesting. So you're saying you've begun to kind of see like the Bitcoin price as something that's almost needed for Bitcoin's adoption as a technology.
I think so. Yeah, it's needed for Kraken to continue operating, and the same for other exchanges. And we need exchanges so people can onboard onto Bitcoin and start using it. Also, you know, Kraken is funding developers. They're funding the open source science and software. So for that kind of sponsorship, both from companies like Kraken and from individuals who have bought Bitcoin and want to see it succeed, the price needs to do something. If it stays at zero forever, then maybe people will see it as a hobby and continue working on it, but it won't have the impact that we really want it to have.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, which is, where does the Bitcoin technology end and the price begin? And is the price of Bitcoin, can it be said to be scientific in some way or influenced by the technology of Bitcoin? Always find that fascinating to think about.
Yeah, I think those two things are not strongly coupled right now. We have seen other cryptocurrencies that have had serious technical issues, and the price has not reflected those issues. There have been chain splits and consensus failures, and the price has not dipped on those assets. I hope that in the long term, we will see a correlation between the security and the strength of the underlying technology and the asset price. If that doesn't happen, then I think, again, we failed, because the market is not valuing security, and that's what's important to us. So I think the fact that Bitcoin has been running for 11 years nonstop and not had any serious technical issues, we've had near misses, but nothing has stopped the Bitcoin network. And I think as that history continues, if we have another 10 years and another 20 years, people will look at that and say, well, this is something that's sticking around and it now has a history and it will probably survive. So you would hope that would be reflected in the price.
Changing subjects a little bit here. I know you work a lot with the new contributors to Bitcoin software, new coders. Certainly that's a big part of the value proposition for Brink, and also your old company, Chaincode Labs, which was, kind of started the idea that we need to sort of train onboard new developers. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about, that phenomenon itself. Why are people choosing to code for the Bitcoin software today? And what's attracting them to it?
Lots of reasons. I think, well, I can talk about myself. When I discovered Bitcoin in 2015, I very quickly realized that there was nothing else I wanted to work on, because this was such a fascinating technology. It kind of ticked all the boxes in terms of intellectual stimulation and interest. And at the same time, it seemed to be something that could have a huge impact and, quotes, change the world in some way. And that's really attractive for someone who wants to make an impact and wants to work on big, interesting problems. So I think that's similar for many Bitcoin open source contributors. They find Bitcoin, they fall down that rabbit hole just like any other Bitcoiner, and they find they can't think about anything else. They just want to work on Bitcoin.
What kind of backgrounds do these contributors have? Are you finding that those backgrounds are changing over time? And is it harder to contribute to Bitcoin Core today than maybe it was 6 or 7 years ago?
It's different. I don't know if it's harder. I think in some ways it's easier because there are now more on-ramps. There's more pathways to start contributing to Bitcoin Core. I've spent a lot of my time and energy over the last few years making pathways for people to get into Bitcoin Core. One thing I've done is the Bitcoin Core PR Review Club, which is a weekly IRC internet chat club to get together and talk about pull requests in Bitcoin Core. Chain Code Labs have put lots of their seminars online. So there's a whole kind of wealth of materials out there for people who are interested in contributing. On the other hand, I think the quality's gone up over the last 6 or 7 years. So if you want to get a change merged into Bitcoin Core, it's going to have to be really high quality. So that bar's gone up. I think that's a good thing. So that might make it more difficult, perhaps. But on the other hand, there are lots more ways for people to get involved, I think.
Say if there's like a listener or someone watching who wants to get involved today, like what's the length of time that somebody is generally kind of committing to this, like prior to them being impactful, would you say?
That's a really difficult question. It depends on a lot of factors, like, what were they doing before? Do they have experience in similar areas? Yeah, I don't think there's a number I can give, but it's something that rewards a lot of time. So if you spend a lot of time on it, like any other discipline or any other, if you think of it as a craft, you dedicate time to the craft, and over time you'll achieve mastery. It is a steep learning curve because there's lots of concepts there, but that's what makes it fun and fascinating, I think.
Right, there's that whole science part of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know anything about cryptography before I started on Bitcoin Core. I didn't know much about peer-to-peer networks. I didn't know much about consensus algorithms because no one did. No one, like 10 years ago, no one knew any of this stuff. I was reading your article about the P2SH Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah.
War. That was great. So any listeners who haven't seen that should go and read that. But it was really interesting going through some of those old mailing list posts and logs of IRC meetings, and you see in 2012 or 2013 people kind of grappling with this idea of a change to the protocol that doesn't split the network, and what we'd now call a soft fork. And those ideas were just appearing. They didn't have names for them, and those people are the experts in Bitcoin now. But the science is so new, so like even if you start now, you're not more than 10 years behind the leaders in this science.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up that work, because I think it it hits on this other perception that certainly exists out there, which is that Bitcoin is not changing, or that perhaps Bitcoin is not as innovative as other cryptocurrencies. I always try to push back on this personally, because I feel like the word innovation is often misapplied in some of these circumstances. I guess, how would you describe the difference between how Bitcoin approaches its software development and other cryptocurrencies, if we're going to remove some of these words that maybe don't describe that as well?
Well, Bitcoin is very conservative in changes to the protocol. To an extent I've not seen anywhere else in my career, working on protocols, working on technologies. The people who work on Bitcoin Core take this stuff incredibly seriously, and are really careful about not introducing unnecessary changes that might damage the network or might lose money for people. I think other cryptocurrencies move faster and are more willing to take risks, perhaps. In Bitcoin, security is king, conservatism and making sure we do things right the first time is king. So yeah, I don't have day-to-day knowledge of other cryptocurrencies, but that is something that's certainly at the forefront in Bitcoin.
Well, I guess maybe let me ask this a different way. So I think when talking about something like Ethereum, for example, like people might use the word platform, right? It is a technology that exists today that you can launch things on it, right? So you can there's some idea that like it exists as a platform and allows people to launch other types of money on it. Would you say that Bitcoin is a platform today? Does that word describe it, or is it not a platform, maybe in the same way other cryptocurrencies are?
I think it is a platform. You can build things on top of it, but it's very difficult. Lightning, for example, is built on top of Bitcoin. DLCs, discrete log contracts, are built on top of Bitcoin. And these things are difficult to build because they are essentially security protocols, cryptographic protocols, and you need to think like a security engineer or cryptographic engineer to build those things. I think the same is true of Ethereum, but it's abstracted away, and people pretend it's not the case. They pretend that you can write a JavaScript application that is a secure financial product, and we've seen time and time again that those things have failed to deliver on their security, with the result that people have lost millions of dollars time and time again. We haven't yet seen that on Bitcoin. I think that's a good thing, because the things that people are building on top of Bitcoin take time and they take care. And I think Lightning is a good example. It's still got a lot of work to do, but the people building that are taking security very seriously.
Yeah, you mentioned, talking about what people are building on top of Bitcoin. What are you most excited about? What's coming on the roadmap? I guess are there areas you think we'll actually see a lot of advances maybe in the next few years?
Yeah, well, the obvious answer is Schnorr and Taproot. And should I briefly explain what those are?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Well, Schnorr is a new type of signature algorithm. It's not actually new. It's been around for 30 years or more. And it would replace or be an alternative to the current digital signature algorithm that we use in Bitcoin, which is ECDSA. And Schnorr allows all kinds of really neat tricks. You can do signature aggregation, you can do threshold signatures, you can do adapter signatures. And these are all just ways of encoding more advanced constructs into a signature. So for example, we can do a 2 of 2 multi-sig that looks like a single signature, or we can construct a signature together that requires a secret to be revealed first. All those things end up looking like a regular signature, but they allow building structures on top which can be used to create products or interesting cryptographic protocols. Lightning could use this to, instead of using hashes for its intermediate hops, use signatures or points on a curve. That helps with all kinds of things. You can do all kinds of really neat applications on top of Lightning, like selling secrets or decorrelating hops in a Lightning payment. All of that comes from Schnorr. And then Taproot is the other part of that potential upgrade that will hopefully come in the next year or two. And that allows multiple scripts to be, or a transaction output to be encumbered by one of multiple scripts. And then when you spend it, you only reveal the single script that you're using. So I've said a lot of things there. If your listeners are less technical and they got a bit lost there, I'll summarize. These things allow lots more functionality. They allow Bitcoin to scale. They make payments more private and more fungible. But those are just tools. They're pretty simple tools that we, as a protocol, provide, and then people can build on top of those. So I think over the next 2 or 3 years, people will be adapting whatever products they were offering before to use Schnorr and Taproot to make those products or offerings more effective. So multi-sig will become more effective and cheaper and hopefully more secure. Lightning will become more effective and more efficient. And there's just a lot of work to do. But the difference between kind of the Ethereum model, where all of that is happening on chain, and the Bitcoin model is these are simple tools in Bitcoin, and all of the innovation happens outside the consensus of Bitcoin. It happens off the chain. So that's the exciting stuff happening in the next 2 or 3 years, I'd say.
Huh. Well, very interesting. It'll be exciting to see, and know we're coming up on time here a little bit. So I guess I wanted to end maybe kind of bringing it home for people who are newer. Obviously you've been in Bitcoin for a long time. How are you introducing people to Bitcoin these days when they're reaching out to you? And are people reaching out to you about Bitcoin and your friends and family? I know I've had a long history with that as well. Interested to hear how your experience has been of late.
People haven't been asking me about Bitcoin this time around. We have this big price increase, and I remember 3 or 4 years ago, everyone was talking about Bitcoin, but it's been a much quieter bull run, I think, this time around. I guess people haven't haven't caught on yet, and maybe that madness will happen next year. I don't know. I just talk about Bitcoin to people. Most people who want to talk to me about Bitcoin already know something about Bitcoin.
And I guess how do you encourage them to get involved, right? So if you're someone who's starting or new, like certainly it's taken me a long time to understand Bitcoin, like over many years, I would say, and I've had to unlearn a lot of things along the way. Have you found that there's just a better way to suggest people get in?
Well, I know what I say to developers. I say come to the PR Review Club, subscribe to the Optech newsletter. That's bitcoinops.org. We have a weekly newsletter about all the technical stuff that's going on in Bitcoin. I don't know. I don't try and convert normies to Bitcoin anymore. I feel like as I got deeper and deeper into this rabbit hole, I've probably become less effective at talking to normal people about Bitcoin.
Right. More aware of the risks, more aware of the trade-offs, right? Which I guess is why you're helping kind of breed the minds. We'll think about that. Well, cool. I appreciate it, John. Where can people get some more information about Brink and what you're doing?
Yep. So our website is brink.dev. Pretty easy to remember, brink.dev. Like you said earlier, we exist to support Bitcoin developers and to mentor and onboard new developers. We're supported by public donations and donations from companies like Kraken. So people can, if they're interested, donate on brink.dev, and you can find everything there.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. And this has been a special edition Kraken live stream. I'm Pete Rizzo, editor-at-large at Kraken. You can find more great Kraken content on our video. It's on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Periscope, and more. So we'll see you next time. Until then, happy trading.